Live from Atlanta, Georgia. It's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I am your host. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really do have a special guest. Before we get started, let you know we are streaming on YouTube. If you have any questions for me and my special guest, please put them in the comment section. We'll make sure to get to them at the end. Without further ado, AB, thank you for joining the show tonight.
Hi, Zach. It's lovely to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for your time tonight.
Absolutely.
So I just want to kind of ask you, what is your occupation? What do you do for a living?
I do a lot of things, but the thing I spend most of my time doing right now is being a lawyer at Microsoft.
Nice. And so, and you also are passionate about multiple things. We were kind of talking a little bit before the show. You actually kind of, me and you share a similar passion towards career development. Can you kind of share that with us?
Absolutely. So I have never been someone who knows how to do one thing because I get distracted easily. So I'm big on having a career that allows me to have autonomy, variety, and creativity. And so what that has meant for me, Zach, is right now I work full time as a lawyer and I'm a writer as well. I host my own podcast and I speak. I love talking about leadership, about inclusion and diversity. So I do that as well. And I'm a mom to a highly energetic, almost 11-year-old boy. So
Wow. You just certainly have a lot on your plate.
I do. And I live in Singapore on top of it.
Yeah, and I tell people that listen to the show all the time, this ain't just a United States based show. We do have listeners from all around the country. So I think it's cool you're in Singapore right now.
Yeah. I mean, I started my career in the U.S. and lived there. I'm American. I'm Cameroonian. Most of my family is still in the U.S., so I stay very deeply connected. But my career has brought me to a bunch of different places, and now the place is brought me to Singapore. So I just want people to know you can have, if you want it, a career that takes you around the world and just expands your horizon in a different kind of way.
So awesome. So I've got already a lot of questions from people that had wanted to know more about a career in law, specifically being a lawyer. So,
Yep.
for the students out there, or let's say they're millennial and they're maybe considering law school, what led you to law school?
So first of all, I would say that students need to give themselves a break. And the reason I say that is because when I was young, I grew up in Cameroon, and at the time, we were very well aware of what was going on in South Africa vis-a-vis apartheid. So when Nelson Mandela was released from prison, even though he was South African, all of the African continent just erupted in joy. And I remember where I was on that day and how thrilled I was. And because he was a lawyer, I thought, man, that's what I want to do. And as I started learning about Martin Luther King Jr. and the work that he did, I just thought lawyers were the coolest people and they could do really amazing things. They could change the world. And so that's why I went to law school, was because I wanted to change the world. I cared about social justice issues. And then I got to law school, got slapped with 120 grand in debt. And all of a sudden, social justice seemed a little expensive. So when I say students should give themselves a break, what I mean is I did go to law school and come out and I became an employment lawyer. And I still get to do some of that work in the sense that my job is to ensure that we're working hard at companies to eliminate discriminatory practices in the workplace, ensuring equal employment opportunities, and I do a lot of I&D work. So for everyone who's listening and thinking you want to go to law school, two things. One, the thing that you think you might want to do when you get to law school may not be the thing you do when you're there, and that's okay. But also, if you're really wanting to stay the course, find law schools that actually support that, will pay for that, and also will find you alumni and other organizations and law firms that will support you post education to do what you want to do. So, the two things I would say.
Great advice. Now, also for people that are out there listening, can you explain, law is such a general, and being a lawyer is such a general field, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. What all
Mhm.
different types of law, are there out there as far as being a lawyer? What types of lawyers are there?
Oh, Zach, how much time do we got to talk about that? I think that is the beauty actually of a legal practice, especially in the US, is that you go to undergrad, you can study anything under the sun and apply to law school. That is the beauty of it. So you don't have to be a liberal arts major. You don't have to go to, have an economy degree or a political science degree to go to law school. And so out of law school, you get to choose what you want to do. I have done employment law and then decided I was going to go do corporate compliance. I've done that. Then I decided I was going to do investigations into anti-bribery and corruption work. I'm doing that, right? So it's pretty much anything you want to do, there's something legal that's required, right? So whether it's helping people set up a business, you need a lawyer. People who are upset with their employers and want to sue them, there are lawyers who can help with that. In the space of social justice issues, you have lawyers who work at the United Nations, the World Health Organization. We have lawyers up and down every level of government in the United States, right? So it's as vast an ocean of options as you want. It's a question of just finding what you're passionate about. That's the thing about law. You've got to find what you're passionate about because there is something you can do in the legal field for almost anything, any career, any industry.
Yeah, I 100% would agree with that. Is something we preach on this show is finding your passion and making sure you live with passion and taking that into the marketplace and going to win. I think that's what's interesting about me. I don't know a lot about what a lawyer does, but what I do know is I've worked with them in in various walks of life, like you said, setting up a business or doing taxes, or it might be you might be in an auto accident, anything like that. You need a
Yes,
lawyer for. Constitutional. There's just so many different types of things. That's what one of the things I like about law school. I think that students don't need to pigeonhole themselves right away when they go to school and say, okay, well, I want to be a constitutional attorney. Well, how do you know that without even studying it, or talking to people around it, or being a mentor? So let's say somebody's out there, they're getting ready to apply for law school.
hmm
What would be some of your advice you would tell them? You know, you talked about the money aspect too, because it's not cheap. And so
yes,
we don't want to just go to law school to have a piece of paper on the wall. We want to
yes.
actually put that into passion. So what would you tell someone if they were your son or your daughter going into law school?
I would say foremost, know why you're going to law school. And that's really important because some people go into law school thinking they want to do a particular thing and realize later on they don't actually need a law degree to do it. On the flip side, I will say there are people who've gone to law school who never became lawyers, but are using the training from law school to do a plethora of things. And that's something that is, I think people need to know that what law school trains you to do well is think on your feet, is the ability to identify issues. We call it in law school issue spotting. And Zach, look at it from any business perspective. Wouldn't you want somebody in the room who can look at your business plan and tell you in no time what all the issues are you're likely to face and how potentially you can fix them, right? So law school teaches you to do that. It teaches you to think about an issue from multiple different perspectives. If you're going to be a litigator, you have to know your client's side of the argument and the opposing argument side as well, so you know how to come back at it. So when you think about applying to law school, think about it from a very expansive point of view. And then when you get there, I recommend taking courses that really are in different areas so you can expose yourself to different subject matters and then choose at that point what you want to do. But going back to your question of if I'm just thinking about law school and I want to apply, what should I consider? Don't knock state schools. I think a lot of people make that mistake. They knock state schools. Everybody wants to get into the top 10 schools or the top 20 schools. And that is fantastic, right? I was one of those students. I was lucky enough to attend the University of Michigan Law School. But I say that because state schools give a fantastic education. In fact, University of Michigan is a public school. So a lot of people want to go to the Ivies only. The Ivies will guarantee you two things, a great education and a big debt, right? If you don't have scholarship, right? It's expensive. So look to state schools in your state for starters because institution tends to be cheaper. And then make sure that you're finding lawyers that you can network with who can also provide you internships during the course of your law school tenure. So that first bit about applying to different schools, but making sure you have state schools on that list is a really important piece of advice. The second one I would say is find one school that is your out of reach school, like your dream school, and put your everything into applying for it because you never know if you'll get in, right? And you just might. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's so competitive to get into law school, it is. But don't let that stop you from having a dream school. Second thing I would say. Third thing I would say is spend some quality time on your personal statement. A lot of people think if you just have the GPA and you just have the high LSAT score, that's going to do it. Well, there are going to be a lot of people, especially in the top tier schools, who have really high GPAs, really have great test scores. And now with the pandemic, that's going to be harder to do because some schools are saying, we're going to pause on the LSAT score, we're going to pause on the GPA because we'll have to deal with the pandemic and people not being able to get to testing centers. How do you differentiate yourself from the competition? What have you done for your community? Do you play sports? How are you changing the world? All those things, you capture them in your personal statement. To me, that has always been the place where you really differentiate yourself from the competition. And a lot of people don't spend enough quality time really asking the question, who am I? What are my contributions? And why should this school take me over anybody else?
Great advice. I think one of the things that stuck with me, what you said was, for example, I had to hire a lawyer last year. I went and saw my doctor a couple weeks ago. And when I went to my doctor for my physical, I never said, "Hey, where did you get your degree from and what was your GPA?" I just told him, my knee hurt. And so, and I think that's the way the world works. A lot of times, we as students, is often easy to say, "Well, I want to go to Harvard or Yale or Stanford," which is great aspirations. But at the end of the day, when you're out in the real world or you're out in the economy, like you said, I didn't hire a lawyer and said, "Hey, where did you get your JD from?" I said, "Hey, do you specialize in this type of law, and have you been successful in it?" So
Exactly.
I like that advice. One of the other things I advise, I want to get your opinion on it. You recommended doing internships in law school. So if someone is out there and they're thinking about going to law school, what I encourage people to do is they need a mentor because they need to talk to somebody before going through LSATs and all this money to see if it's a passion of theirs, and they need to network. And
Yes.
networking, I encourage them, especially during pandemics, is LinkedIn. And so I wanted to get your take on that.
Absolutely 100% agree with you. So when I think the name of the game is intentionality, you have to be really intentional about your career. And what that means is you have to be thinking about why you want to go to law school, but what you intend to get out of it. But just as importantly, what you intend to put into the world because of it, right? So for me, what that meant was in undergrad, I sought out at the time. She was a Hennepin County judge in Minnesota, and I'd heard about her, and I'd heard about some of the work she'd been doing around um, really fair judicial sentencing. It was an area that was interesting to me. So I reached out to her and I said, Judge Pamela Alexander, I would like to be an intern for you. She said, we don't take interns. I said, I know. But I'd like to shadow you. Since you don't do internships, do you allow for shadowing opportunities? She said, no, we don't. I said, okay. But can I come up to your office and just learn how you do what you do? And so by the third time, I had worn her out, right? And so she said, come on down and see what I do. And she allowed me twice a week that to sit in on her criminal law cases and her civil cases. And I learned so much from there. And I can tell you, having sat through some of the criminal cases, I made a decision right there and then, as a sophomore in undergrad, right, that I was not going to become a criminal lawyer. That's how up close and personal you sometimes have to get to know what it is that you're getting into. And even if and it was not just her. I had a family friend who was an immigration lawyer, and I said to him, can I hang around your office on Saturdays when I have time and work with you on some of the cases? He did a lot of work for illegal immigrants. And he said, sure, come see what I do. And so this was all before law school. So I had a chance to test out immigration law, to test out criminal law. And I spent about a semester every Saturday going down to the juvenile detention center, teaching them how to read, listening to their stories, how they got to prison, and working out ways of, life path changes when they got out. All of those things helped really cement in my mind what kind of law I wanted to practice and what I did not want to practice, right? So I really encourage people to do that. Find people in your network who are lawyers, ask them to teach you. You'd be surprised how many people want to teach young lawyers or people who want to be lawyers. Ask them to teach you, shadow them in court, shadow them in the office, get a sense of what does it feel like to work at a law firm. You may not actually like it, or you may come out thinking it's the best thing since sliced bread. But don't be afraid to reach out and ask people for an opportunity to shadow them and see what they do. We tend to be flattered when people do that. So that's something that I think a lot of people don't do, and it's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, so I just wrote a new book called Don't Be a Zombie: How to Find a Career You Love. It launched last week, and one of the tips and tactics I recommend is job shadowing, preceptorships, internships. There's about 18 different methods. But what you said, let's focus in on that because I think it's so important what you said. And normally I wouldn't focus on this, but people might think it's minute what you said, but it's powerful and they need to hear this. So you talked to the criminal justice lawyer. You reached out on your own. Did you have any connection with this person, by the way, in Minnesota?
No, no, and it was not a lawyer, it was the judge. Even more intimidating.
Judge. So students and professionals ask me all the time because I encourage them. What I encourage them to do, AB, is I tell them to get a LinkedIn first, become active on there, become a participant, become a professional network in your community, give back, so on and so forth. Once you establish that LinkedIn account, I encourage people to reach out. If you think you want to be an IBM as a software engineer, reach out to somebody in that career.
Yep.
And for them, it's so scary for them to think, oh my goodness. And see, at my age, I sound like an old man, but we didn't have LinkedIn. So I had
We
to go up
did.
to people physically and say, excuse me, could I get your help? And so a lot of people are afraid to send that message. How did you get that courage to do that?
The, it wasn't easy, but I just thought to myself, what do I have to lose? The worst I can say is no, right? I have nothing to lose. And I think that's the thing that has probably guided me the most in my career is I am shameless about asking for help. Shameless. I'll just say it right now. Zach, I have had what many consider a really amazing corporate career. And just in September, as I switched roles I left GSK, which is a pharma company, and began at Microsoft. And it clicked to me that, wait a minute, there are a lot of people who helped me get to where I am, right? So on LinkedIn, I began doing one post a week, identifying one person who has impacted my career in a positive way. And I did that because I think gratitude is such an amazing way, first of all, to recognize that you didn't do it all by yourself, like many of us like to think. Secondly, it gives us a chance to really look at the person who's helped us and say thank you. And the reason I did it on LinkedIn was because I wanted other people to celebrate them as well, right? Now, what does this have to do with your question about asking for help? Most of these people, I actually reached out to them proactively and said, I'm going to law school. Can you please write me a letter of recommendation? I'm going to law school. Would you mind if I shadow you? I'm in law school. I don't know my left from my right. Can you give me some guidance as to whether I should go to a law firm or not? While I was practicing, there were people who I went to and said, I'm having this issue. I don't know how to resolve it. Can you give me some tips? How do I grow my career? So at different points, I have just thrown out the whole shame card, fear card, all of those things. If I need help, I've taught myself to ask for it. And the reward has been phenomenal because here's what a lot of people don't know. When people spend their time helping you once, especially if you're successful, they become silent advocates, they become silent champions, and sometimes not silent. You have them in your corner, and all of a sudden, you have this network of people who want to see you succeed, right? And what did you do to deserve that? You ask them for help. I know it sounds crazy, but it's amazing what just saying, can you please help me, does for a lot of people. And I'm surprised more people don't do that, but we really should as students go out there, ask for help. You'd be surprised that people will say yes and go the extra mile to actually see you succeed in what you're trying to accomplish.
And AB, it's a fear factor because I've talked to a lot of even millennials, even Generation X students, or I call them students, but Generation X people or baby boomers who have been in a career for a long term and they're not used to networking outside of their own parameter would think, oh my gosh, just reaching out to a stranger and asking them about their career. But it's really as simple as that. And I keep harping on it, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a huge deal because, you know, that's what I contribute a lot of my success to is not being afraid to reach out and ask. And, I tell students and people this all the time, just ask. I mean, in a professional way, obviously you're not asking for $100,000, but, you're asking for something that they're passionate about. And most of the time they're going to say yes or no. And if they don't answer back, who cares? Move on to the next person. It's not really that big of a deal. I mean, I've taught classes at the university level and told people to connect with me on LinkedIn. They've had questions right there in that classroom. I said, I tell you what, connect with me. I can connect you with a doctor or a pharmacist or whatever. And none of them ever do it. Not all of them ever do, but most of them don't take me up on that. And I think that's less than the small, tiny difference between being successful and maybe not.
Boom.
Um, yeah.
That to me is the biggest folly when it comes to building your career. Somebody says to you, call me if you need anything, and then you don't. I'm like, what? So I always tell people this. If you're gonna hand me your card and tell me, Abam, call me if you need anything, best believe I will be calling you. So you better mean it. If you don't extend the invitation.
Right.
And I'll tell you a story about that. So I went to an inner city high school in Minneapolis, Roosevelt High. And one of the scholarship awards that came through there was from a fraternity. And I applied and I won it. So when I got to the ceremony, it just so happened the president of the fraternity at the time was a lawyer. And he read my essay and realized I wanted to go to law school. He takes out his card, he hands it to me, and he said, if you ever need anything, let me know. I said, are you sure? He said, yes. I said, okay, thank you. Not 3 months later, I reached out to him and said, the summer is coming, and you work at a law firm. Would you mind if I come do some observation and an internship at your law firm? He said, sure. That was my first introduction to a law firm.
Wow.
It came from someone saying, here's my card. And to tell you the truth, from there on, I've known him since then to this day. I asked him for a letter of recommendation to law school. He wrote that. I asked for a letter of recommendation when I was applying for my bar license. He wrote that. Our paths crossed at a law firm at some point, and he was a mentor at that law firm. And when I was doing my gratitude series on LinkedIn, he was the first person that I celebrated. So I say this to say, you will get people who support you, who have your back when you ask for help. But sometimes they may be the one that offer. Take people up on their offers.
Great advice. Just spectacular. I could talk about this all night. Just how, how important it is to really network and create that communication. And there's people out there that could definitely are excited to help you advance. And all it does is take you to just ask, and it's really that simple. And we can't overstate that. So I did have some questions that come in from students. I wanted to make sure I had time to get to them. One
Sure.
person, I don't know if they're students, but yeah, I always say they're students. But one writes in and says, "What is a reasonable score to have on the LSAT and still get into a reasonable law college?"
I wouldn't even venture to answer that question only because I don't remember what the cutoff point is. I went
Yeah,
to
and
law
it's
school in
changed.
2004 and
Yeah,
it's changed since then.
yeah,
What I would say though is make sure you're applying to law schools when you fit within their range. And if you're not, if you're within the range, but not on the high end, try to bolster your application with that personal letter and with your GPA. But I don't know what the new numbers are.
yeah, yeah. That changes. And somebody writes in saying they want to be a district attorney one day. What is the path that they need to go? What does that path look like? I'm not sure if you know that either, but um,
I've worked with a district attorney before. I would say before even thinking about what the path is, talk to a district attorney. Talk to
yeah,
them, right? Understand whether that's what you want to do, and then they're in the best position to tell you the best pathway to get there. So go out there. It's like I want us to start pushing people to actually start doing the work and asking for help. Call up your local district attorney, ask them, how did you do what you do now? How did you get there?
awesome. Someone writes in, what was one of the biggest mistakes of your career? What was one of your biggest career mistakes?
Hmm. I would say, and eventually it turned out well, but I think I had an opportunity before I started law school to either go work at a corporation or to go work for Amy Klobuchar. Um, when at the time, I think she was the district attorney in Minneapolis. And I thought about it in terms of money, not impact. And I went the corporation route because they gave me more money. And so I regret that because I would have eventually made my way back to corporate if I wanted to, but I missed the opportunity to work in the district attorney's office to learn how we really enact change, to learn how we can impact, especially the criminal justice system, right? So the lesson for me there was at a pivotal point where I could have picked social justice over money. I picked money. I've since learned. I've since learned. So I would say that was the biggest mistake I made in my career, and I've since course corrected.
So, on the last, before we get you out of here, tell us a little bit about the founding of this. Want to make sure I get this Mama Talk. Tell us about your show and how can, let's say people are interested in that. Let's link to that. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So it's called MamaTokTok. And where I'm from in Cameroon, it means talkative girl or talkative woman. And so when I was a little girl, I asked a lot of questions, which got on a lot of people's nerves because I was very curious about the
Sounds
world.
like me.
Yeah, and a lot of things that adults did and said made no sense to me. So I'd always ask. I was that kid who would ask why a lot because I'm just very curious. And so when I decided I wanted to start my own media organization, there were two things in mind. One, I wanted to make sure that marginalized voices, or voices we don't always hear in mainstream media, could have a platform to share their perspectives. And secondly, because I've lived and worked in Africa, in the US, and now in Asia, I thought, wow, it'd be wonderful to have a global perspective. So MamaTokTok was a way to do both things, to bring together very diverse perspectives from different people around the world, and then to showcase that. So it's just like this one, Zach. I bring people on. We have conversations around a whole host of things, from leadership to raising kids to, I think recently I had Sam Adegoke from Dynasty just talk about what it is to be an actor in Hollywood who's also Black and who's also African. So it's just a wealth of information for people around the world, and you get a really good sense from over 40 countries how people think about the same things that Americans think about, but just from their local perspective.
That's awesome. Just an awesome thing you're doing because, think about it, even if you're in America and you do want to move into a different career, maybe this is a great show for you to get plugged into. Or if you want new perspectives on the world and you haven't traveled outside the United States, this might get your feet wet. I know I was in Cape Town, South Africa. You mentioned Johannesburg before the call before we had this, and I enjoyed South Africa. So this will open up your perspective to a lot of different things. So AB, thank you so much for your time. I know you're really busy with what you've got going on. I really do appreciate you giving back to the people that are listening to this show, and we do appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Zach. Thanks for having me. And for anyone who listens or is watching and you're a student, reach out on LinkedIn if you want career advice, support, or just want to connect. I'm happy to do that as well.
Thank you for that. And we're going to link in all these links as we talk about. We're going to link in your organization, and we're going to link it to the YouTube as well as Facebook. So again, thank you so much for joining, and thanks for that kind invitation on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And listen to the show, guys. It's fun, fun, fun. It's Mama Talk Talk, and it's on Apple Podcast as well.
Thank you, AB. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Zach.